Hey, welcome. What I'm going to do in this SPSS demonstration is go through some of the steps in SPSS that we're going to use to orient ourselves to a data set and perform some of the techniques used in Chapter 2 of your textbook, which are going to cover frequency tables, frequency histograms, and obtaining percentile ranks. And we've done that by hand, and now we're going to look at it in the SPSS interface. So as you see over there where I've put in the steps on the left, first thing is I've opened CUNY Oporto. Now I'm going to open SPSS, and I'm going to open it from the main SPSS icon. So our license is active. You can just close out this first screen and you see a blank sheet that appears first. It's just notice that this default sheet contains 3 tabs, just like you have multiple tabs in Excel. One of them is an overview. It doesn't have anything of interest. I don't even know if it's clickable. The second one is data view, where you would see all your raw individual pieces of data. And one of them is the variable view, which lists variables in rows. And so to look at that more clearly, I'm going to open the data file that was provided in the first class, 1.data._types. And here are my data. You can see that we have these ID numbers for a certain number of cases, and we have 3 variables: school type, map score, and class rank. And for each of those, we have a value. So for each case, we have 3 observations. And you can look in, you can see all the what we call the raw data there that haven't been manipulated in any way, haven't been summarized, and the variables listed. Now we're going to actually look at this variables page because we're going to fix it up so that it kind of tells us things that we want to know a little bit more. So we have these 3 variables. We don't count really ID as an actual variable. And you'll see that there are all these columns. And one of the columns is the level of measurement. It says measurement. It says what kind of measure. And the choices there, if you click on that, you can measure something as a scale, which would be interval or ratio. You can measure it as ordinal, which means ranked groups, but not interval level. And you can measure it as nominal, which are just unranked groups. And SPSS has, actually I manipulated this, but SPSS will fill these in by default based on what it thinks the data look like. And here's school type. And you see, if you look on the left, school type is private, public, charter, and other. So you think to yourself, is that an ordinal scale? Okay, are they rankable? Is one of them greater, more, less than another? And they're not, of course. So they are nominal level data, categorical or nominal. And also, if you look at the decimal places, there's no point in having decimal places for a nominal variable. So I'm just going to set that to 0. It's just a convenience. Then you want to look at the other characteristics. So school type is listed as a numeric variable. That's because it is written in, if you look at the data view, as numbers, 1, 2, 3, possibly some 4s. And we don't really care about the widths. There are currently no labels. You can put in a label to describe the variables, but labels often make the actual visuals in the output confusing. So I prefer just to give a descriptive name. All the names are fine. You cannot have a space in a name. and there's certain characters that cannot appear in a name. So you want something short, you want something that's generally explanatory so that you will know what you're looking at when you see a variable. And you want no spaces or special characters like question marks. And you'll get a warning if you put in a question mark, you'll get, that's an illegal character. And then otherwise, school type looks good. Map score is a scale variable, and class rank is, now that really should be, because it's a rank, ordinal. So we fixed these things, and then I'm going to save. Actually, SPS, yeah, it's sometimes the saving doesn't work as well as you would hope. Okay, so we assign levels of measurement, we assign number of decimal places, and now we have this one categorical variable, and each of the values is a code, and the code has a meaning. So we want to be able to know, we want a little translator, a key, okay? We have case 67825, who has a value of 1 for that. Well, what does 1 mean? So you can set it so that SPSS will report the meaning whenever it reports that person's score. And the way you do that is you go to values. These are called value labels, but you go to the values column. And currently there are no value labels, and you're going to create one. You're going to say, oh, okay, the first value, which is a value of 1. And looking over to the left to see where I've set these values. 1 is a private school. Then I'm going to add another value. Next value is 2, and that's a public school. Next value is 3, that's a charter school. And the next value is 4, that's another type of school. And then I tell it okay. Always tell it okay at the end, otherwise the things you put in won't take. So now those appear, and they will appear when you get any kind of report about school type. You will be able to see, oh, there are 20 people who are in a private school instead of 20 people who have a value of 1. It's convenient. So now we're going to go on to the ways that were covered in class: frequencies, histograms, and percentiles. So we're going to get a frequency table of the class rank variable and a frequency table for school type. And neither one of those is a continuous variable, but you can do a frequency table on anything. You shouldn't do a histogram on any type of measurement, but you can do a frequency table on anything that occurs with varying frequencies. Sometimes it's a good idea, sometimes it's not a good idea, but it's certainly a good idea with something like school type, which is a nominal variable. So getting frequencies is very easy. You go to analyze, okay? Analyze. That's where all of your analytical functions are going to be. And one of the first things that comes into it is descriptive statistics. These are all different kinds of descriptive statistics you can get. And they overlap in many ways. So you can get means and standard deviations under frequencies, under descriptives, under explore, all kinds of places. But for getting a frequency table, the obvious place is frequencies. And we have said, so you click on frequencies, and then you click on, we are going to get one for class rank. So you just click that over, you highlight it, and then press the arrow. And we're also going to get one for school type. So you can get multiple frequency tables in one shot. And you'll see by default, display frequency tables is already checked. That's always true in SPSS. Oh, and it says on to the left, it says use GUI. to select your variables. GUI is hardly an ancient term no one uses anymore, but it's called the guided user interface, which just means that it's the kind of point-click drop-down way of looking at things. And I'll say a little bit more about that in just a second. So here we're going to just say, okay, those are the two frequency tables that we want. Okay. And now you're going to see an entirely new file. And this is an output file. And until you saved it, it's called output 1. So what it tells you is, first of all, this is kind of a summary of what went into this analysis. And you had 50 valid cases for each variable and no missing cases on either variable. So for class rank, you have some ties. So you don't have 50 people at a rank of, or you don't have each person with a unique rank. You have ties. And you can see that, for instance, the top rank only occurs once. One person is at the top of the class. 2 people are tied for second place. 1 person is in 3rd place, and so on. 8 people are tied for 20th place. And 1 out of 50 is 2% of cases. 2 out of 50 is 4% of cases. So this gives you your frequency tabulation and your percent frequency. The valid percent column is only going to come into play if you have any missing cases. So if you have missing cases, then valid percent is not, percent is, for instance, 1 out of 50, 1 out of all the cases that might have been there. Valid percent, if you were missing some people for the class rank variable, would be 1 out of however many people were actually in the count. So maybe you didn't have some data on a couple of these people for class rank. 2 people, you didn't have any data. Then this first place would be a count of 1 out of only 48, which would change the percent value here. And here you also have your cumulative percent. So when you have tabulated your first case, you've accounted for 2% of the data. When you've calculated or tabulated both your first and your second case, you have now accounted for 6% of the data. The 2% for the first place, the 4% for the 2 people at second place is a total of 6% of the data accounted for. This should always add up to 100. The cumulative percent column, or I'm sorry, it shouldn't add up to 100. It should reach 100 at the last value. This should add up to 100. This should add up to the total number of cases. So that's how you get, oh, so then I said we would look at another one, school type. So school type is probably of more interest, although it is kind of interesting that you had 8 people tied for 20th place. But this is quite interesting for basic reporting. If you were just describing the data, then you could say out of 50 participants from 50 different participants, 12 of them, 24%, attended private schools. 23 of them, 46% or almost half, attended public schools. You could look over at your cumulative percent and you could say 70% attended either private or public, and so on. So that is another frequency table. Now I have put over here in kind of a light color, because it may not be of the greatest interest, that you can also write all of this in syntax, which is the kind of super programming language for SPSS. And I'm just going to show you what syntax for this calculating frequencies look like so that you know it's available. Some of you might become more interested in it than others, but it can be useful from, I mean, it's indispensable for many purposes, not so much at where you are, but where you might become. So if you want to get syntax, if you're fluent in syntax, you're going to write in syntax. And I often use a combination, but if you just want to look at syntax, you can go to whatever command you were using, in this case, frequencies, and rather telling it okay, note that it will remember the last analysis you did. And so if you want to start from a brand new analysis, you'd click reset. But instead of taking, okay, go ahead and give me that output, I'm going to click paste. And paste creates a third kind of file. So you have the data file, which has the data view and the variable view, the output file, and this is a syntax file. And this tells you you're working with data set 1. That just means it's the data set that's currently active. And you have asked for frequencies, that's the command you've used, on the variables, class rank, and school type. So the variables being performed on in this frequencies command are class rank and school type. And you've just put them in the order analysis, which means class rank is going to show up first because you put that first in the list. And so that is the syntax. And to run that syntax, in other words, to make it create output, you tell it to run, and you'll get the same thing you got before. One of the nice things about syntax is that you can comment on it. So you can write, you have to start with an asterisk to make a comment, and you say, oh, this is my syntax for getting variables. I mean, I'm sorry, getting frequency tables. Use it whenever getting a frequency table. And then you put a period, and you notice this grays out, which means it will not run as any kind of command. And okay, so it says this is my syntax. That means that, hey, maybe I don't want to get class rank, so I can edit it. As long as I have kind of the basic command, the right format, then this will work with different variables listed. So it's a generic formula for creating a frequency table. Okay, so that was just a little aside. But I often, if I have a research assistant, I often will ask them to keep syntax files so that they can keep track of what they've done. Okay, so now here we are going to get a frequency histogram of the MAP score. And we're getting a histogram this time. And why are we getting a histogram, not a frequency table? Well, if you look, let me go back to my raw data. Where's my raw data? There, data view. So you've got these MAP scores, and it's a pseudo continuous variable. You don't actually have anything, any scores between, in these small intervals, but there's an underlying understood continuum of whatever map is measuring, whether it's measures of academic progress test, and is it measuring literacy? I don't know. But there's this assumed achievement that's on a continuum. Then we're going to treat it like it's more or less continuous. It's really, it's intervals. We assume that the test makers have it so that it can act like interval data. Again, that's a digression. So I'll just show you what happens. I'll show it to you. I'll show you what happens if you ask for a frequencies table of the MAP scores so that you can see why we don't want one. And this is why we don't want one, is because it doesn't really tell you very much. Okay, so one person got 640 and one person got the rank didn't tell you very much. If you have a lot of different scores, a table is not as good a display just for looking at qualities of the data as a histogram. You need the frequency table to get to the histogram, but it isn't as easy to interpret as a histogram. So what we're going to do in this case with the MAP scores is we're still going to stick with descriptive statistics and frequencies. But for the MAP score, which is the variable I've chosen, we're going to go to charts. And we're going to say, oh, what do I want? I want a histogram. Not going to worry about anything normal curvy. We just want a histogram. We want to see what it looks like. Continue. And now we've already looked at this frequency table. I didn't particularly want to look at it no matter what. So we're going to uncheck that. So now we're not going to see a frequency table. We're just going to get the histogram. Histogram is checked. Display the table is unchecked. And we're going to see the histogram. So this is the histogram. It does just by default tell you also the mean score and the standard deviation and the size, the number of cases. And this is what it looks like. What can you say about it? I would say that it's not grossly asymmetrical. There's some kind of gaps in it, but it's not like it's reasonably symmetrical. There's gaps on both sides in the middle. But what it is it's kind of platykurtotic in that there is no particular peak and there are no particular drop-offs in either tail at the low end or at the high end. It recedes in frequency, but not